fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, August 19th. I am back and planning to do shows all this week and all next week, and after that we'll see, but certainly all this week and all next week, maybe even on the weekends, so you might get 14 shows in a row. We'll see. All right, thanks for joining me, and it is I haven't turned on the camera, have I? I should really do that. It is an adventure on the road. It always is. So please bear with me as the internet fades in and out over time. I've got a backup plan, but I don't know how well it will work. And I am working on a more long-term solution. Hopefully tomorrow I'll get that fixed. But this is what we got in the meantime. So hopefully we'll go through the next hour and a half without too many incidents. And the show will be a shorter show today because I've got a hard stop at what is my 9 o'clock, your 3 o'clock for a class I'm teaching for the Ayn Rand Institute. All right. So we are going to get to Kamala Harris's economic policies. We'll talk about that. There's been a lot of talk over the weekend about that. We're going to cover a few quick stories before that, just to get us rolling. And let's see. And then, of course, we will take your Super Chat questions. So please prepare the Super Chat, and we will prepare questions for the Super Chat, and we will get to them. I promise that. Also, quickly, I did spend a weekend in Andorra. Quite a beautiful place. I mean, Andorra is this little principality between France and Spain. I still haven't read up the history of it. I have to read up the history of it. But geographically, it's just stunning. It's these towns inside these basically canyons, valleys with tall mountains all around. We went up to one mountain where you could see France and Spain and Andorra, and it truly a beautiful, beautiful place. It's, I'm sure, some kind of tax haven, and it's growing. There were cranes everywhere. There was building everywhere. Cost of housing is not that high, given I think a relatively high quality of life if you like that kind of thing. It doesn't seem livable to me in the winter, but I know people who only go there in the winter. I guess the skiing is fantastic. If you like skiing, it seems very cold and a lot of snow and hard to get around. I don't know, very narrow, windy roads. But super amazing, super beautiful. If you're ever in, Eastern Spain or Western France, and you got a couple of days, I would definitely recommend going into Andorra. It is quite beautiful. It is not Basque. It's actually more Catalan. So they basically speak three languages there: Catalan, Spanish, and French. So it's a combination of the three. But I think mostly Catalan. It's definitely, just across the border from the Catalan part of Spain. I got that out. Here in Barcelona, everybody speaks, they don't speak Spanish, they speak Catalan, and which is this weird amalgamation of Spanish, I don't know, Portuguese, Italian, French maybe, just all mixed up together. And it's, I think by law, they have to, like the shop signs have to be in Catalan. It has to be the menus all in Catalan. Now they also offer you an option in Spanish, and luckily in most of the restaurants in English as well. But the primary language is Catalan, and they speak Catalan. So if you're just a straight Spanish speaker, even Barcelona, and certainly in the rural parts of Catalan, it's a bit of a challenge. But almost everybody here speaks Spanish. So you understanding them might be a problem. Them understanding you is not an issue. Anyway, that was interesting. I want to read up a bit on the history and why Andorra was allowed to stay independent. You'd think it would have been taken by either France or Spain. Who knows? Powerful prince, middle of nowhere, like up in the mountains. Imagine it was hard to get to on this trip with a car, with roads. Imagine what it was like, horse and buggy, trails, snow, rain. It must have been really, really difficult. So must have been super hard. So maybe they just left it alone because it was in the middle of nowhere. But other parts of the Pyrenees mountains are either belong to Spain or France. Also, I'm curious, and again, I'll have to read up about this. What was their position during World War II? That is, I know a lot of people tried to escape the Nazis by crossing the Pyrenees mountains into Spain. Spain was technically neutral. Although Franco was sympathetic to the Nazis, it was technically neutral. So by crossing the Pyrenees, you could get to Spain. From Spain, you could probably get a boat to the UK or to the United States, or make it to Portugal, and from there. But what was the status of Andorra? Anyway, it would be interesting topics to research. Lucas says, just for those of you interested in languages, Catalan is very similar to the dialect spoken across the French, Swiss, Italian regions around Mont Blanc. The original dialect name is Arpitan. All right, interesting. So that part, there's no big influence of German, because you'd expect in Switzerland to have some German impact as well. But anyway, Europe is this, Spain in particular, and I know this is a little off the news, but Spain in particular, you've got Catalan with the Catalan languages, then you've got the Basque country with their own language and their own independence movement that used to be terrorist affiliated with. I think it's quieted down. Catalan has long wanted independence and came close and almost rebelled against the central government a few years ago. The former prime minister of the Catalan region was just in Catalan for like a few hours before the police tried to arrest him, and he escaped. So there's a lot of drama around that. Then you've got we were in, a few years ago in 2019, we were in Galicia, which is in the northwest of Spain, just above Portugal. And there the language is some mixture of Spanish and Portuguese, and the letters and the spelling and everything is some mixture between the two. And theoretically they want independence. And so I don't know about Andalusia, which is the southwest of Spain, which is the old Moorish influenced part of Spain. Even though the Moors occupied all of Spain, their cultural center was in Andalusia, and it was the last part of Spain to be conquered by the Christians. But they also want, I don't think they have their own completely different dialect. They just have their own accent, a very strong and very different accent than the rest of Spain. Anyway, it's these places are so, and this is true of Europe in general, and what makes Europe so different than the United States. They're so entrenched in their history. They're so determined, in a sense, by their history, or they let history determine them. And people here, to me, which is weird to me, maybe not to many of you, but to me, people here trace their roots in a particular village, in a particular place, in a particular something, generations and generations, centuries into the past, right? Centuries into the past. And that is so, maybe you can explain some of my views on some things, or the passion I have behind some views, but, I'm a fourth generation, I'm third generation. My kids are fourth generation, born on a different continent, not just different country, but a different continent. So we're real wanderers. We have no roots, and always seeking something better, always looking for the best place to live on planet Earth. That is the safest place on planet Earth, which is the history of my people, to the extent I have any people. But yes, here in Europe, things are really grounded in a history, grounded in tradition, grounded in something ancient. All right, let's cover a few stories in the news. Today, this evening, I'm sure you all know this because I'm sure you're all eager to watch this live, will be the opening of the Democratic National Convention. They've got keynote speeches tonight on the stage. The convention will end on Thursday with Kamala Harris and Welts and all the festivities around all of that. They've got a wide array of speakers. We've got President Biden is going to speak. First Lady Jill Biden are both going to speak tonight. And then you'll get all the who's who of the Democratic Party speaking during the rest of the week. And you get the House Minority Leader, and you get Chuck Schumer, and you get, of course, the governor of Illinois. Now, what makes this convention particularly interesting is its location and the conflicts within the Democratic Party, which are occurring right now. The location, of course, is in Chicago, in Illinois. This is why Governor J.B. Pritzker would be speaking. I mean, he is the hosting governor, if you will. But Chicago has a history with Democratic conventions. In particular, it has the history that everybody remembers has read about. If you probably don't remember, I don't remember, is the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. It has certain similarities to this convention. For one, the sitting president had decided not to seek another term. Johnson, who was eligible to run again, did not step aside. There was his vice president, Humphrey, was therefore the Democratic nominee. Now, Humphrey came into the convention pretty unpopular among Democrats, whereas Kamala seems to have galvanized the Democrats, so she is very popular. So that's definitely a difference. The other thing that is common to the two, but interesting in its difference, is that 1968 was, of course, the height of the Vietnam War. It was also the height of the protests against the Vietnam War. Right now, we're at the height, maybe towards the end of the Gaza War, a war where the United States does not have any troops on the ground, no kids of any Americans are dying there, and yet passions within the Democratic Party are very, very high with regard to U.S. support for Israel around the war. So in 1968, the convention was remembered for the violent demonstrations outside of it, the attempts of the police to control the crowds, their inability, the violence between the police and the protesters. It was bloody and it was unpleasant and it was horrific. And I think ultimately the consequence of this was it painted the Democratic Party in a very, very negative light, which helped, I think, Nixon win that election in 1968. Well, this time, the organizers of protests are claiming that they will bring out the largest anti-Israel or the largest pro-Hamas protests ever in the United States. They're talking about tens of thousands of people who will be marching in the streets. And of course, anytime you get crowds like that marching, there's the potential for real violence. There's the potential for conflict with the police. The police are ready. They are psychologically, I think, and prepared for this, but this is Chicago. So, I say that in the sense that Chicago politics is very, very, very left. And in that sense, it's going to be interesting to see how the police behave. We know that they did very little during BLM, and they let BLM riot and destroy and go crazy in the streets of Chicago, and that the mayor of Chicago at the time, we have a different mayor now, but just as progressive, Mayor of Chicago at the time defended BLM for breaking into stores and being violent and all of that. So again, there is a history both in 1968, not BLM, and now we've got this. These demonstrations have been planned for weeks, months, so you would expect the police to be as well prepared as they have ever been for anything like this. But it is going to be interesting, and there's no question in my mind that if these protests are out of control, if it gets violent, if the police cannot control them, I mean, this will play right into Trump's hand in the sense of, the Democrats are the party of violence, the Democrats are the party violent protests, of riots, of burning stuff down, and this will play directly into Trump's hands. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to watch. I haven't seen any reports on when the protests are starting. I assume it'll be today. It's already, what is it, around noon, Chicago time. Hopefully, if you live in Chicago, you've left for the week. This is not a good week to be in Chicago. Go on vacation, go cross town, go anywhere, but don't be in Chicago right now. It's just going to be unpleasant. First of all those Democrats in one place has to be spooky, and secondly, the demonstrators with their Hamas flags and they're just horrible and horrific. So I'll be watching. You guys will be watching, and we'll see how they behave, and we'll see how it all comes down. And if you're a Trump supporter, my assumption is you should hope that the demonstrations get violent and it gets really ugly really quickly, because I think that'll play beautifully into Trump's hand. Okay, talking about the Middle East, quick update on Israel. Nothing much. I mean, still no sign from Iran or Hezbollah that they are going to attack. Indeed, latest signals are that they are laying low until the negotiations for ceasefire in the Gaza are finalized one way or another. If the negotiations are successful and there's a ceasefire, they might postpone the retribution indefinitely. But if the negotiations fall apart, they might attack again. But there's also plenty of reason to believe that Iran just would rather not do this. They've got a new president. They have major economic problems, and the reality is that they are worried. They're worried about the fact that the United States has placed as many military assets in the region as it has. We've got several aircraft carriers. We've got submarines. We've got just a lot of planes are being flown in and sitting in the airports of all places in Qatar. Saudi Arabia has promised to, I think, ultimately to help the Americans. It's not going to allow anything over its airspace originating from Iran. To the extent that they are really afraid that they will be crushed. And they should be afraid, because, they could be crushed. They won't be, because Americans are cowards, but they could be. So the Iranians are not particularly motivated around this. Hezbollah is different, but Hezbollah takes its marching orders from Iran. But so far there's nothing. Now there is continued negotiations around this ceasefire and hostage release deal. Supposedly a lot of progress. I don't mean that. I mean that in the negative sense. Progress means this is Orwell country. Progress means bad stuff towards a deal. So who knows? Hamas has turned it down so far, but they're still negotiating, and the Americans have sent, I forget his name, to the Middle East to negotiate all this, and the Qataris and the Egyptians, and I'm sure the Saudis and everybody else is putting a lot of pressure on Hamas to accept the deal. I think Netanyahu pretty much, if Hamas accepts it, will have to accept this deal as well. He's put himself in that position. You can only walk out away from a deal so many times. So I think he'll probably accept it if the Hamas accepts it. So it'll be interesting to see. In the meantime, the tit for tat in the northern border continues. You get drone attacks and missile attacks on the border, in the border area on a daily basis, and then Israel goes in and bombs, various Hezbollah facilities and kills, assassinates Hezbollah military leaders. It did so over the weekend, and it blew up an ammunition depot that Hezbollah has, and the Lebanese claim 10 people were killed. That's what happens when you put ammunition depots inside populated civilian areas. Blame Hezbollah for any civilians who die as a consequence. So that is going on, but again, the operations within the Gaza Strip continue. I think over the last week or 2 weeks, 50 tunnels going from Gaza into Egypt were destroyed, 50, and that's not all of them. There are many others. So I don't know how you ever stop that, particularly if the Egyptians are not serious about stopping it. So I think at this point we're basically waiting to see what happens with the ceasefire deal, and I expect we'll know by the end of the week, maybe the end of next week, certainly by the end of August. I'm pretty sure we will know one way or the other where the deal goes, and therefore what to expect moving forward. One other war to cover quickly, and that is Ukraine. Ukraine continues to engage in the Kursk region of Russia, where it's just continuing to occupy more and more territory. The Russians are starting to mount a defense. They're moving units into the area, but there's also, by all reports, record numbers of Russian soldiers are surrendering to the Ukrainians. There's a massive pipeline of prisoners of war heading from the Kursk region back into Ukraine to be interned. In the meantime, the Russians are also pushing in the Donetsk region, and they're making some progress there. So there's a lot of debate right now among military experts, I see, whether this Kursk incursion, this taking of Russian land, is a good thing, a bad thing. Strategically, is the strategy a good strategy, bad strategy, all of that. Military experts that have mostly been wrong about this war from the beginning, so I'm not super confident in any of them. But it is a good question. It's still to be determined strategically how this plays out, and whether by doing so they've weakened other spots, made it more difficult maybe next year to retake land occupied by the Russians, or to defend land that the Russians are trying to get, particularly in the Donetsk region. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. In the meantime, the Ukrainians are doing great. They blew up a couple of bridges to prevent the Russians from being able to move troops into the region. They will probably continue to do that and disrupt any attempts of the Russians to bring troops into the Kursk region in order to beef up the defenses. In the meantime, the Ukrainians seem to be digging in, and by the way, this is one area of the war where Western tanks have proved quite useful. The area of Kursk, the Russians did not build these massive anti-tank defenses, which they did in the occupied areas that they have of Ukraine. Where they built minefields and all kinds of trenches and all kinds of anti-tank, and where they deployed drones against tanks very, very effectively. None of that really has been done in Kursk, and as a consequence, you can blitz forward using tanks and just take territory very, very quickly, with troops coming in behind you, clearing out the territory as you just move forward and take territory. So very effective on the part of the Ukrainians. Again, we'll see how the strategy evolves and what it actually strategically means. Okay, so let's talk about Kamala. So Kamala has had a lot of energy and a lot of momentum behind her from an electoral perspective. And I think she's gotten a kind of a free ride from Trump, who has been unbelievably ineffective at criticizing her instead of criticizing policies and particular thing. He'd rather complain about crowd sizes and about whether he won or lost the 2020 election. I mean, he's just running an awful campaign, a really, really bad campaign. So she's benefited from all of that, and it's taken her, I think, quite far, according to the polls. It's taken her into the lead in many of the swing states and in the popular vote. Now, again, you can only rely on polls so much. We've learned that many, many times, and it's also very early. It's very early in terms of what the polls actually mean. But again, Trump is running a bad campaign, I think, and I think pretty much everybody within the Republican Party thinks Trump is running a bad campaign. So it's not just me who doesn't like Trump, but it's also people who like Trump think he's being pretty bad. But Kamala's advantage up until now has been that she doesn't have to stand for anything. She basically is the anti-Trump. She's young and energetic, so she looks somewhat, I don't get it, but obviously looks somewhat charismatic. She is a continuation of kind of the Biden presidency, which kind of for a lot of Democrats is reassuring and comforting that there's continuation and continuance from the Biden presidency. But she's also, dabbled in kind of left-wing progressive politics, and therefore has the appeal on the very far left. And she doesn't really and hasn't articulated any real policy positions that are different than Biden's or that are uniquely hers. There's no real yet. There hasn't been, at least until this weekend, until Friday, hasn't been any real programmatic positions that she's taken. This is what I'll do when I become president. And she's been very smart by basically not giving us any of those. Well, she did on Friday. And they were, I mean, at the end of the day, they were so stupid that even a lot of Democrats were like taken aback. I mean, even her, I think people who generally support her were like, what? So where do we start? Basically, two main economic proposals. So she gave this economic speech. This is her big thing, right? And the big thing, starts off with basically, basically making a point that, let me just one sec. I'm just checking something out here. All right, this is giving me a hard time. Basically focusing on two things, which are good things. She wants to increase opportunities and lower costs. And that's great. Yeah, I mean, my economic plans and my economic ambitions, if I were in a political position, was increase opportunities and lower costs. Now, I would also include something about freedom and so on, but the way to increase opportunity and lower costs is through, you guessed it, freedom. We'll get to some proposals around that in a minute. But she proposed, we'll talk about opportunities in a minute, but she proposed basically increase opportunities and lowering costs by using the worst types of government intervention possible. The heart of what she proposed is basically to prevent grocery prices from rising. We've had inflation. Everybody's felt that inflation, particularly people whose grocery shopping is a big part of their consumption basket. They've really helped. They've really felt, the inflation. It's been fairly high, right? So she proposed. She named the fault for this. So, whose fault is all this inflation? Well, I mean, she came up with she is proposing a very, very ancient, a causal relationship between inflation and corporate greed. So she's basically decided that she is going to adopt Elizabeth Warren economics. She is basically going to adopt a left-wing populist economic agenda. Not that different than Trump's. We'll get to Trump later. But basically blame the other, and in this case, the big other, the big evil other, that when it comes to economics, we always blame. Let's blame economics. Let's blame corporations. Right? Let's blame big business. The big supermarkets, the Costco's of the world. Let's blame Walmart groceries. Let's blame, big corporations. Because she argues that inflation is caused by price gouging. Now, there were a lot of problems with that argument. First, it has a very long history. It really goes back to a suspicion of business and profit-seeking, call it greed, but profit-seeking. It goes back to the Greeks. Both Plato and Aristotle had both were very suspicious when it came to merchants and the profits. Merchants who were middlemen between producers and consumers, the profits they made. Something was off there. They didn't get the economic value of merchants. But you saw that in a variety of different economic experiments during Greek time, but maybe the most famous example of blaming merchants and blaming markets and blaming corporations. They weren't technically corporations back there, but blaming businesses was Diocletian in the very early 4th century AD, in I think 301. There was a lot of inflation in Rome, and the inflation was clear why the inflation was happening. This is a period where Rome is beginning its decline, and part of the manifestation of that decline is shrinking tax revenue. Shrinking economic activity resulted in shrinking tax revenue just at a time when they need a lot of money to protect the borders. I mean, the barbarians were ever more powerful, ever more aggressive, ever more seeking to disrupt Rome and to take land from Rome. And so what they started doing, what the Roman treasury started doing, is debasing the coins. Silver coins had less silver, and by debasing those coins, and one way to think about inflation, because there's so much confusion about inflation. One way to think about inflation, I got this from the grumpy economist, who often has simple, easy ways of describing things. It's the decline in the value of money. The decline in the value of money. That is that overall money is worth less. Now, what is the worth of money? The worth of money is measured in how much you can purchase for it, but also if the money was silver or the money was gold, a decline in the value of money would be generated by having less silver in a silver coin. You've got less value in the coin, so it's worth less. And therefore, people realize this, and they're not willing to sell you as much for it as they did before, when it was pure silver and its value was higher. When you print more money, when there's a certain stock of money, and then you print more, you make that stock of money worth less. You are devaluing the value of money. When you run deficits, when you run massive deficits that are unlikely to be paid back using kind of any normal means, the market then expects you to inflate in the future, to devalue the currency in the future, in order to be able to pay back with less valuable coin, less valuable paper money in this case. So they expect inflation in the future, which they already price in today. So all of these things are a lowering of the value of money, which manifests itself in a hit on the purchasing power of that money, which manifests itself in rising prices, rising wages, rising everything that is denominated in terms of the money, its cost rises. And that's what CPI and these other measures are trying to capture. They're trying to capture the overall rise in prices. Now, this is why I often tell you, we talk about relative prices. When there's a supply shock, let's say for stuff coming in from China because of COVID or whatever, then stuff coming in from China's price might go up. But if the money is still the same money, if nothing has changed in terms of the quantity of money and the value of the money, then those prices will go up and other prices will come down or stay the same. But the general prices will not go up. You will not get this lowering of the value of money. You will not get a systemic rise in prices of costs. And so supply shocks don't cause inflation. Let's say that greedy corporations manage to corner the market for tomatoes. And I mention tomatoes only because tomatoes in Spain are amazing. They're so much better than tomatoes in the United States, just as an aside. But let's say they could corner the price of tomatoes, or corner the price of chicken, or corner the price of something, as Elizabeth Warren has accused corporations of doing. Let's say that were true, and the price of tomatoes just went way up. If nothing happened to the monetary base, if nothing happened to the quality of money, to the value of money, then people would buy fewer tomatoes, and they would buy more of other stuff, and overall, you would have no inflation. Even if all grocery prices went up, if those went up for a while because of, quote, greedy corporations, you still wouldn't have inflation because other things their price would go down. There's only so much money to be spent at any given point in time. So, it's important to understand what inflation is, which clearly, Kamala and her economic advisors and the people who wrote this up have no clue what it is. It's also this, and by the way, one of the most, where are the democratic economists? I mean, most economists are Democrats. This idea that inflation is caused by price gouging, greedflation, as Elizabeth Warren has called it, it's not very popular among economists. I mean, really, no serious economist, with some exceptions, really believes this. Where are they? Where are all these economists speaking up? Now, some have. Noah Smith, to his credit, left of center economist, has spoken up against this price gouging theory and was quite critical of Kamala after Friday. So have others. There's what was amazing was a couple of stories in the there's among a lot of stories coming out of Democrats just upset about this, but also I see an op-ed in the Washington Post, very, 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 very critical of this, not by somebody I know to be a well-known Republican, although she might be, I don't know. And then you get then there's another Washington Post. There's an interview with some of the opinion writers, some of the editorial staff at the Washington Post, and they are scathing about this idea that inflation is caused by price gouging. So I have no idea who came up with this idea, and I have no idea, where it comes from. I know where it comes from. I have no idea where all the economists are. I mean, the one economist that has actually supported this nonsense, and this is just shocking, is a Nobel Prize winner, Joseph Stiglitz, who has become a joke. I mean, he used to be an economist. I mean, we all had real disagreements with him when he was an economist. But he functioned within a certain space of economic theory, and he did economics, and he won a Nobel Prize for economics that he did. Again, we might not agree with the conclusions and his explanations for everything he did, but he has just become a Paul Krugman. He's become a hack. It's like he's lost like 50 IQ points or something. Complete nonsense, right? This is him, I guess, last night or 2 nights ago. Neoliberalism has given full rein to the growth of market power. Sectors of the economy where there is more market power have had more inflation. We call it greedflation. First of all, that's complete nonsense. I mean, the areas that have had the highest rise in prices, not inflation, the highest increase in prices, and he should know better. Again, relative prices, he's talking about relative prices, some sectors, not all sectors. Inflation covers everything. But those sectors that have had the most increases in prices over the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years, if you had one way to identify them, it's where there is incredible market concentration in government, education, healthcare. Those are the things and housing. The things most regulated, more controlled by government have seen the highest increases. I mean, it really is sad to see. I don't know, at least you have to respect somebody like Stiglitz. Okay, he used to be a professional. Again, a professional, not a very good professional, you could argue, but a professional. And then they become complete. I mean, even using the term neoliberalism, which he can't define, nobody can define. What's he now against? Free trade? Is that what he's against? Again, a position that no economist would have taken 10 years ago. No real economist would have taken. I mean, Trump made it okay to rile against it, but I'm sure Stiglitz was opposed to the demonstrations at the World Trade Organization in Seattle in 1999. I'm sure he supported the World Trade Organization back then when he was an economist. No more. The guy's a complete and utter hack. Anyway, where were we? I was talking about dialysis, right? Anyway, dialysis, they reduced the value of a coin, which created inflation. Dialysis blamed this not on the devaluing of the coin. He blamed it on corporate greed. He blamed it on the greed of businessmen. So Dialysis actually he created a bureaucracy within the Roman Empire that actually set price controls, limited the ability of increasing prices. And literally, you can find these records, and we have them, records of how much traders were allowed to charge for wheat and barley and rye and millet, and how much they were allowed to charge for Attic wine and I don't know what must, boiled down must. Somebody knows what must is. And then spiced wine and wine with wormwood. That sounds really good. I mean, we need to try sometime at one of the fancy restaurants here. Wine with wormwood. Rose wine, pork, beef, goat meat or mutton, pork sausage, beef sausage, hen peasants, chicken, cabbage sprouts. And then, of course, there were also price controls on labor because inflation was everywhere. So there were price controls on farm labor, on stonemasonry, and cabinet maker, and carpenter. And he basically created a massive economic bureaucracy to deal with all of this. And, of course, it was an unmitigated disaster. Prices did not go down. It had no impact on inflation because the coin was debased. Nixon tried this, just to so you're clear that this is a bipartisan temptation to, in the early 1970s when inflation was out of control, not only did in the White House everybody wore a pen that said whip inflation now, even Alan Greenspan, go figure, wore that pen. But, Nixon imposed price controls, which blew up in his face, a complete disaster. Prices are a monetary phenomenon in the sense that, inflation is a monetary phenomenon in the sense that it represents a debasement of the currency, a debasement of money. And all right, I'm told that must is what comes out of the fermentation of grapes, which then turns into wine. So they were actually setting price controls, not just on final goods, but they were setting price controls on intermediary product. I mean, it just shows you, the sophistication of the Roman Empire, that they could enforce such a thing, not just final merchant prices, but even prices for in the supply chain. Pretty amazing. Anyway, it was a complete disaster for Diocletian, and only helped create the economic turmoil that ultimately led to the complete destruction of the Roman Empire, or complete demise of the Roman Empire, and demise of the economy of Europe. Right. This is one more, not the determining step, but one of the economic steps that led towards that complete demise. So basically, what everybody's been saying about Harris is she's proposing. What Harris is proposing is in cases. One more thing to say before I get to this. So one of the things to note is that inflation in grocery products has been about 1 point something percent for the last 8 months. So it peaked in 2022, and it's been going down since then. What's driving inflation right now in our economy is not grocery prices. So she's fighting something that the American people feel, emphasis feel, like is a real issue and a real problem and needs to be addressed. So she's fighting a real battle, but she's fighting one that she thinks will appeal to voters because they feel like they're under this real constraint. Anyway, price controls have never worked throughout history, never worked. So she is not proposing price controls exactly. She is proposing to allow the FTC and the SEC to be able to first of all, identify when price gouging is happening, when companies are raising prices. I don't know, how do you define price gouging? High. They're raising prices high. They're raising prices higher than some government bureaucrat thinks is appropriate. That's what price gouging is. In those cases, when a group of bureaucrats at the FTC or the SEC, entities that just don't have enough power, we know that, when a group of bureaucrats at the FTC or the SEC feel like prices are out of control, they will have the power then to go after the businesses that control that product, that are raising the prices. It will give them now a new tool. They have the antitrust tool. Now they will have this new tool to go after them for excessive prices that are unrelated to the cost of doing business. Now, I mean, this is a rabbit hole, because what are the costs? And a lot of economists disagree on what costs should be included and what not. I mean, not very good economists, but again, they're going to disagree. For example, a big one is the cost of capital included? Should you count the cost of capital, which is often, contingent on interest rates? Is profit okay? Should you have profit? What about making money during some periods, making maybe more than usual some periods in order to offset the fact that there are other periods where you lose money? Oil industry is famous for this. Who gets to decide? How do they determine? So she's not And then in that case, what they will have the power to do is cap the price. Can't go over this price. Again, why is she doing this? Now, here's I think, the interesting aspect of this. I don't actually think this has anything to do with inflation. I think this serves two purposes for Harris. One is it presents it to the American people, to swing voters, as somebody who takes their plight seriously and wants to do something about it. And the reality is in America today that 99% of the American population are basically worse than ignorant about economics. And I say worse than ignorant because it's not, if you're ignorant, you don't know anything. But they think they know economics, but what they think they know is all wrong. All wrong. So she appeals to them by saying, I'm going to do something. And I'm going to go after those corporations. And everybody loves blaming corporations. This is the same tactic as Trump used. We need an other to blame for our problems. Now, we could say, it's the Fed's fault. They printed too much money. We could say, yeah, it was COVID. But that makes the government look weak. So that's not a good other, particularly not when you were just in power. So the best other to blame inflation on is, you can't really do it to Chinese. You can't blame immigrants in this case. You can't blame elites. You can't blame Chinese. So you blame corporations. So this isn't an other Republicans like to use, although Trump often comes close. But it's one Democrats love to use. And it's one that a lot of working class Americans sympathize with. So a big part of what she's trying to do here is basically to engage with the anti-business, anti-corporation, anti-profit, anti-big business, not small business. We love small business, big business, anti-big business sentiment that exists within the American population. And, from an electoral perspective, it could very well work. It is potentially very, very powerful. So that's the first thing she's trying to do. But really the second, and this is the scary part, and this is the first part is scary too, that people are this ignorant. Again, price controls is really economics 101. Everybody knows. But here's the scary part, the scarier part. I think she's doing this because this is the Democrats' wet dream. The Democrats' wet dream is not about price gouging. It's not about inflation. It's about centralizing economic power. It's about allowing bureaucrats and government officials and people in power to control our economy and to control it at the level of minutia. It's about empowering, the exact opposite of what the Supreme Court is trying to do. It's about empowering the FTC and the SEC and the many alphabet agencies, alphabet soup agencies, something like that we have, to have more control over this crazy wild west of corporate capitalism we have in America today. I'm kidding. We have no capitalism in America today, but that's how they perceive it. They want to unleash the FTC to prosecute companies. This is to give Lina Khan even more power than she already has in her antitrust division. This is to now expand them beyond antitrust. Oh, that's just one tool. This is to give them multiple tools to put them in the position of power over American businesses. This is about going after business, going after corporations, going after so-called greed, going after successful business. This is all about that envy-driven, but really it's about power. Right? So it's not a policy battle about inflation. They know basically inflation might be more stubborn than the Biden administration would like, but inflation is not, particularly at the levels it's at right now, is not being driven by corporate greed. They know this. But they see this as an opportunity for a power grab. They see this as an opportunity to increase the power of the government vis-a-vis corporate America. Right? This is a way to control, to take more control, to take more power. They have no interest in actually dealing with inflation, which would mean cutting government spending, or at least closing the deficit in some way. They have no interest in stopping the massive spending. Creating a scapegoat for all of that allows them to continue to do all the stuff that they are doing. It allows them to spend like crazy, to continue deficit spending, and blame corporate America, and then go screw corporate America at the same time. So, no, I mean, the real issue here is power, control, central planning. That's what it's all about. And seen from that perspective, this is really, really, really scary stuff. This is a massive growth in government, and it reflects unbelievable economic ignorance or a massive power grab. Now, let me tell you what the good news is. And it's significant. The good news is she can't pass this. There's no way she can do this. This would require a bill in Congress. This would require Republicans go along. There's no way. I don't think a lot of Democrats would go along with this. I think this would be unbelievably unpopular. I mean, Elizabeth Warren has bills in the Senate. She's been trying to pass bills like this since 2020. And they've gone nowhere because even the leadership in the Democratic Party thinks this is insane and crazy. Never mind the Republicans. They need 60 votes. They would need 60 votes for this. So the good news is it's not happening. The bad news is that this is only there to, encourage the anti-business sentiment in this country. And that's one thing we do not need is this crazy anti-business sentiment. And now, the Democrats are really fueling the flames of this. If Trump is primarily fueling the flames of anti-immigration, this is the anti-business attempt, particularly big business, as we said before, big business. Really absurd. I'd recommend John Cochrane, as usual, on economic issues. He's excellent on this kind of stuff. If you're interested in kind of particularly the dialysis, he goes through a whole analysis of dialysis's plan, what happened. He actually has the lists of the goods and everything. You can find it in Grumpy Economist, grumpy/economist.com. Just put the Grumpy Economist, Google will do the rest. Substack, you should definitely be reading, if you're interested in economics at all, you should definitely be reading the Grumpy Economist. You should definitely be reading John Cochrane. His latest piece, which was published a few days ago, says, okay, let's take her speech and let's talk about lowering costs. Let's take opportunity in lowering costs. What would we actually do if we were serious about increasing opportunity and lowering costs? And this is just his list of proposals, which I thought was mostly good. There's one or two that I disagree with, but mostly good. And therefore I wanted to share this with you just for fun, just as a positive. Here's what you would do. Remove all coverage requirements for health insurance. There's a good one. Eliminate corporate taxes. Tax people when they spend corporate profits, not when they earn them. Prioritize economic immigration. If you want to come to the U.S., have a clean record, $10,000 in the bank, forswear social services for a few years, come on in. Want to lower costs for health care, child care, elder care? Let them come. Legalize the 10 million who are here working, paying taxes, staying out of trouble. Next, eliminate tariffs. Buy American requirements and other import protections. I like John Cochrane. Eliminate mandates for paid leave, health insurance, time off. Eliminate hours, straight time versus overtime laws, employee versus contract laws, minimum wages, comparable wealth, and any other restrictions on the right of workers and employers to contract. Employers will hire more people if they can more easily fire them. That increases opportunity, more jobs. National right to work. You're free to join a union, but the union may not force all workers at a plant or company to join. Eliminate prevailing wage minority contracting. Davis-Bacon and other cost increases for federal contracts and businesses receiving subsidies. IRA, CHIPS, that is, eliminate the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS, electric vehicle charges, all of that, right? Eliminate restrictive zoning and building codes. We'll get to building in a second. And building controls. The ability to get rid of non-paying renters is key to getting landlords to rent and developers to invest in rental housing in the first place, to get rid of eviction controls, right? See Argentina, where eliminating rent controls led to a quick supply of rental housing and lower rents, even before construction kicked in. Shot clock on all federal regulatory actions. 1 year from filing. If you haven't heard an answer, your project is approved. I love this. I mean, short of getting rid of the regulatory agencies. Priorities include nuclear power, drug regulation, real estate development and redevelopment, and energy infrastructure, FDA especially. If it's legal in Europe, it's legal here. At least allow foreign clinical trials to count. Remove all energy efficiency mandates, starting with auto fuel economic standards and electric vehicle mandates, and ethanol and gas mandates. Bring back washing machines and dishwashers that actually wash. Let us buy whatever light bulbs we want. Let the price of energy determine optimal efficiency. End the whole of government war on fossil fuels, especially natural gas. We forbid pipelines and U.S. exports and then tell the Ukrainians not to bomb Russian fossil fuel facilities in order to keep supply up and prices down. If you must impose a uniform carbon tax, impose a uniform carbon tax and no other energy regulations. If it's true that renewables are now so cheap, you won't have to. Voucherize all healthcare and insurance subsidies, absolutely. And let the free market rip to provide cheaper and better care. Repeal the Jones Act. This is the act that requires shipping. You've heard about the Jones Act, right? But yeah, repeal the Jones Act. End all farm subsidies and price controls. End government monopolies and entry restrictions. For example, end the ban on private bus companies in cities. And if you want to increase opportunities, universal school vouchers, no more teachers' unions, no more government employee unions, no more government employee unions. That would be a good one. Have occupational license reform. Get rid of occupational licensing. Stop subsidizing pointless college majors. Stop subsidizing any college majors. Now, that's just the beginning. You go on and on and on. But that's a good list. That is a very, very good start. So I encourage you to go read Grumpy Economist, This Opportunity and Lower Costs, a great little segment. Okay, quickly, the other thing that Kamala proposed was to lower housing costs. And she was going to lower housing costs by providing, getting more, making housing more affordable. And that is by two things. One, she said she wants to increase the supply of housing, which is great. That's a great idea. But the federal government has very little power over doing that unless they are willing to pass a federal law to ban all zoning requirements. So she has no power really to do that, but she wants to cut red tape, use federal government land to build housing. Great ideas, all of them good ideas. Then she wants to give a $25,000 kind of a grant to first-time home buyers. That increases home prices, unless you're also increasing supply significantly. But since the federal government can't increase supply significantly, all you're doing by giving people more money is creating more demand. And it's exactly that demand. When demand goes up, prices go up. And if supply can't catch up, then prices stay up. So that doesn't do anything. Again, this is Econ 101. If you want to reduce housing costs, and to do that, you have to do two things. One, I think, will be more popular with you guys than the other. First is deregulate housing, which means get rid of zoning restrictions on the kind of housing, rental housing, multifamily. Too much of the United States is zoned for single-family homes. Get rid of that zoning requirement, which, by the way, Donald Trump is in huge opposition to. He is a defender of single-family zoning requirements, which is a guarantee to raise housing costs. So get rid of zoning and allow for all kinds of housing to be built and let the market determine which housing is built. And two, increase immigration, particularly what's considered low-skill immigration, because right now we have a massive shortage in construction workers, and the only way you get more construction is if you have more workers to build the buildings. And if you deport all the workers, housing prices will go up because there'll be a massive crash in the number of housing being built. Americans don't work construction. Construction is worked by immigrants, primarily illegal immigrants. You deport them, housing will collapse. Anyway, it's very easy to solve the housing problem. Very easy. You know who doesn't want to solve the housing problem? People who already own homes. Like, I own a house. It's gone up in value. I like that it's gone up in value. A lot of my net worth, a lot of your net worth is probably in your house, right? I don't want housing to go down in price. If housing goes down in price, my net worth goes down. Wait a minute, that's not fair. I don't want that, right? The people who don't want house prices to go down are the people who already settled, people who have a house. Like when I was in California, my houses appreciated dramatically, at least twice. Two of my houses appreciated dramatically, created a bunch of equity, which I then used to buy bigger houses. I mean, if housing prices had been flat, it would have been much harder for me to buy bigger houses. And yet housing prices should be flat. And the only way to get them to be flat is by increasing supply. So the people actually constantly motivated to restrict housing supply, to stop building new houses, are the middle class, particularly older middle class, people who already have a house. And because they view it as an investment, because we've taught them that housing is an investment. Housing is a consumption good. It's not an investment. Your net worth should not be tied to your house. But it is. So the politics of housing are almost impossible to get around. So anyway, the stuff that she's proposing for housing is, other than reducing regulations and red tape, all that's good. Let it be. It would be amazing. She also wants to increase the child tax credit and other things to cut taxes for the middle class, find more exceptions. Why not just cut taxes across the board and simplify them? Politicians only want to make them more complicated, not simplify. And by the way, she and J.D. Vance completely agree on the child tax credit. They both want very high child tax credits as a way of helping families. That's the thing. Now, I was going to do a whole segment now on, well, anyway, I'll do that another time. But I was going to do, basically this represents unbelievable just economic illiteracy, or, which is more likely, a massive power grab. But the economic illiteracy is manifest by the fact that it's popular. And it's manifest by the fact that very few people are criticizing it. But it really is just a power grab, is my point. All right, if you want more on this stuff, as I said, John Cochrane is a great source. The other person to read about all these things is Scott Lincecum, who I had on the show a few weeks ago. He's excellent on these kind of policy issues, trade, on inflation, on greedflation and all this stuff. He has long essays about it, so I highly encourage you to do that. Here's the tweet that Kamala Harris had. And she hasn't taken it down. She should take it down. I mean, it's embarrassing. As president, I'll work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gouging on food. My plan will include new penalties for companies that exploit crises and break the rules. And we will support small food businesses that are trying to play by the rules and get ahead. By the way, one of the things that they want to do is not allow companies to sell in large quantities at a discount to places like Costco. So they want to eliminate the quantity discount. They want to get rid of the discount stores, which would actually raise grocery store prices on average, right? It would raise grocery prices on average. Just to give you a sense, grocery profits in groceries are anywhere between 2 to 4%. Average profits, this is our percent of revenue, average profits, S&P 500, 8%. Even in 2022, when they were gouging like hell, 2 to 4%. So this is just nuts and stupid. And, this is not only, this is massive, massive economic ignorance, however you splice this, but also a massive power grab. Now, what is amazing right now, and I'll just end with this, what is amazing right now, this depressing thought, what's really amazing is the economic ignorance of both political parties. Trump and Kamala Harris might be the two most ignorant presidential candidates in American history. And that's saying a lot because we've had a lot of pretty bad, when it comes to economic presidential candidates. But these two are they're really upping the ante in terms of just economics 101, just supply and demand curves, just stuff like that, right? Just ignorance, like tariffs, trade, price controls, the effects of subsidies, the effects of giving a couple $25,000 for a first-time home as if that doesn't affect prices. Just sheer ignorance at the level of Econ 101. That is truly, truly nutty. All right, we don't have time. We'll do this tomorrow. It looks like Candace Owen has just gone off the deep end in her anti-Semitism to the point where father-in-law is now speaking up against her, defending the Jews from Candace. Anyway. And she's upset. She's very unhappy. All right. Anyway, we will get to that, but we will do that. We'll talk about that tomorrow. So stay tuned. I came across this story, which I thought was funny. So it turns out that sometimes greedflation works in the other way as to lower prices, because right now, you might want to take advantage of this. Right now, there is a value meal war going on among the fast food chains. McDonald's, Wendy's, Jack in the Box, White Castle, all of them are going crazy, lowering prices on their value meals, because I think they have found Jesus and they've decided they are no longer going to be greedy, and they are going to just work for the benefit of mankind and for your benefit, and provide you with the horrible food that they make at very, very low prices. So they are no longer going to be greedy, and they're no longer going to try to make money. And as a consequence, they are now dramatically lowering their prices. So McDonald's has a $5 value meal. Wendy's has a breakfast bundle. Taco Bell has a Lux Cravings box. That sounds yummy. And there's this massive cutting competition. It's been going on for about 2 months now, right? For about 2 months. I don't know how Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris missed this. But it turns out that big business is already abandoning profits and abandoning greed and going for cheap stuff, selling cheap. It's just so stupid. All right, we're good. Yeah. Anyway, we'll do Trump another time. There's plenty on Trump too. Yeah, I mean, even when Noah Smith came out with the headline, Harris makes big mistake by embracing price controls, and he's a huge Harris supporter, right? Then he also did a whole column today, kind of rationalizing, making up reasons why her housing policy is not that bad. Yeah, I mean, you read people like that, you have to be careful. All right, here we go. We got a lot of Super Chat questions. We're still about $100 short for the second hour. Ooh, and I don't have a lot of time because I had a hard stop at 3. So if I don't get you a question today, which is possible because there were a lot of questions, and if you want to ask a question now, make it a $20 questions, 5 of those, and we'll get to our goal, which would be terrific. But basically, if I don't get to your question today, then I will get to it tomorrow. I'll keep it here. Tomorrow, I'm unconstrained. We can go for 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. We can go for as long as you pay me to go. So don't worry if I don't get your question. We'll get it. Thank you, Wes. Wes just basically got us halfway to our goal by doing a $50 sticker. That's another way in which, of course, you can support the show. Let me quickly go through here and see if we've got any stickers. Yes, Rajesh. Thank you, Rajesh. And let's see who else. Silvanos. Thank you, Silvanos. Thank you, Jonathan Honey. All right, so we are all up to speed, I think, and we're $56 short. So just a reminder to all of you to help us out with that. All right, let's start with David, who is 5,000 Costa Rican, something or other. He writes, nostalgia has positive connotations in our culture. Is nostalgia a virtue? It seems to me that it has more in common with regret. I don't know. It's a good question. It certainly could have elements of regret, but I think it has a certain yearning for something positive in the past, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? One might have had a good experience with a person, and one is, and maybe that person has passed away, or maybe we don't have a relationship with that person anymore, but you still have some remembrance of that positive events that feels nostalgic. I don't think it's regret. It's a yearning for whatever it is that, whatever feeling one had originally, right? So, yeah, I don't think it's it does have a positive connotation in our culture, probably more positive than it deserves, but I don't think it should have a negative connotation. I think it's just a recognition of a particular attitude towards the past, a recognition of the fact that there were certain good things in the past, certain emotions evoked in the past that one values, and the ones one misses, in a sense, not regrets. You can miss something without regretting anything. So it's more about missing. It's more about wanting to feel that way again. Or remembering that feeling, even a better interpretation. All right. Thank you, David. David thinks he stumped me. I don't know. Did you stump me? He gives an example. Voters are nostalgic for past days of glory. Yeah, but you could be, right? I mean, I'm sure people in the Dark Ages were nostalgic for the Roman Empire. And it probably made sense for them to be nostalgic. There was something positive in the past. Now, if you live in the past, if you constantly yearn the past, if all you can do is think of the past, and then it becomes a real problem. And usually the past is never as good as one imagines it was, particularly these days, when the future seems so positive and we're so much better off than our past. But you can imagine that the past was more glorious, and it's harder to imagine that in the 21st century. But again, think about the Dark Ages, looking back at the Roman Empire. Wow. When the water flowed and there was actual roads and there were aqueducts and we actually had tiles for the roof and, beautiful floors and multiple story homes and nice, beautiful bricks and amazing pottery. All of that, by the way, disappeared during the Dark Ages or declined dramatically in quality. So anyway, all of that interesting. Michael, are narcissists worse than altruists? Well, worse for who? In what way? As we've talked about before, Michael, narcissists are usually products of altruism. That is, narcissism is just one manifestation of their altruism. It's a type of rejection of altruism without embracing any kind of morality in its place. So, rejecting the other by embracing self in a kind of a superficial way. So, are they worse than altruists? No, not necessarily. I mean, it could very well be. It depends on the kind of altruist. It depends on the kind of altruist and the kind of narcissist. And again, often they go together, right? Hitler's both a narcissist and an altruist. It depends on how altruistic they are, and it depends on how narcissistic they are. So it's an issue of degree. You can't say unequivocally one is worse in any kind of. You'd have to specify a context and exactly the degree. What did I do? Okay, I answered it. Michael, have you seen Patrick Ben-David's bizarre anti-Semitic discussion with Dan Bilzerian? I used to have some respect for these guys. Now so many formerly respectable people have gone down this M2 rabbit hole. I have not seen that. It's pretty amazing that they would have that Patrick Ben-David would express anti-Semitic views. I mean, his name pretty much suggests him being Jewish, but I get it. It's not. I don't know where the Ben David comes from. But Beit David. Beit David means house of David in Hebrew. Beit is house. Yes, I mean the M2 Christian nationalist, anti-Jewish nuttiness on the right, like on the left, is all-consuming and very seductive and very tempting to even people who are smart. I'm sure if you were sitting in 1931, 32 Berlin, and you were seeing these people attracted to the Nazi Party, you would be going, what happened to these people? They were sane, normal, ordinary people. Well, you're seeing it now in real life. If you often wondered, how did this happen in Nazi Germany? Well, it's happening right around you. So you can see it. Not that they're turning into all-out Nazis, but they're turning into very different people, and there's definitely many of them turning into, both on the left and on the right, authoritarians, and anti-Semitism is part of the package, unfortunately, for many of them. I will look for that, Patrick David. I've got a bunch of interviews to catch up. I've still got to do the Elon Musk interview with Jordan Peterson, and there was another interview just recently that I saw, which looked really interesting. There's a lot of interviews out there that have a lot of. Peter Thiel just did a big interview. I forget on whose show, but Peter Thiel did an interview, and Peter Thiel's always interesting, so that'll be interesting to do. Facusta. New Taiwan dollars, cool. Hi, Yaron. I'm an Argentinian English teacher living in Taiwan. There's a combination for you. Argentinian English teacher living in Taiwan. Love it. And I've never been to Taiwan, and I would like to come. How about you organize a talk for me in Taiwan? If you organize a talk for me in Taiwan, I will come. Anyway, thanks for showing us how much good there's still left in the world. I hope I can gradually increase my contributions as I slowly improve my situation. I think this is his first first super chat. Thank you, and congratulations and thanks, and yes, cool that you can teach English in Taiwan and you're from Argentina. That's a great combination. Stephen, I read that Andorra was not invaded during World War II and it was used by people escaping the Germans during the war. Cool. I mean, it's a great place to escape to because very difficult to invade, mountain passes, high cliffs, difficult mountains to traverse. So I can see it, and I'm glad it was used. I'm glad it was used by people escaping the Nazis. Oyvind, so I've been thinking some. That's good. I hope you've been thinking much, not just some, much. Objectivism is a morality for living. Current times and philosophies, I think, show people are happy enough merely existing. Social welfare makes people numb to ambition and striving thoughts. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. What you have today is a world in which people are quite satisfied in just living with a small L, just somehow getting by. And they're not, what they lack is ambition. What they lack is a thirst for life. What they lack is a thirst for embracing life fully, right? And we suffer from that. We suffer in the world from lack of ambition, no question about that. So I agree. And how do you solve that when that is cultivated by a government that both penalizes people who are too ambitious, high tax rates, antitrust laws, and other ways, and facilitates a minimal quality of life through welfare, minimum wages, other forms of subsidies, and then ignores the people who fall through the cracks? You have to question the morality. You somehow have to get to young people and appeal to the ambition that maybe is still there, that hasn't been extinguished. I can't think of any other way to do it. Marlene, Mary-Aline, thank you as always. That was easy. Thank you, Mary-Aline. Jennifer, have you had caprese salad there? Rick grows fresh basil in our laundry room for it in the summer, in the laundry room. Yes, caprese salad is amazing. Have we had, I don't think we've literally had caprese salad. We've had a bunch of tomatoes, both in restaurants and just you buy them at the grocery store. And then there was a gourmet grocery store where they sold these tomatoes that were like, super expensive. But they were so delicious, so delicious. But even the regular tomatoes you buy in the grocery store are delicious. And then the ones in the restaurants are amazing. And then you can get, most of the restaurants, I think tomatoes are in season right now, so we're getting a lot of tomato salads. Tomato with some cheese burrata or some other cheese that's similar to caprese salad. And it's all been terrific. We like tomatoes anyway. We eat a lot of tomatoes in Puerto Rico at restaurants, but they're just that much better here. I mean, you can sometimes get great tomatoes in California. I remember once we got served at our favorite restaurant in Southern California, which is closed now, Taco Maria. They served, for a while he served this dish with tomatoes from a particular farm in a particular location, which he sourced, and they were amazing. They were the best tomatoes I've ever had. But it was so rare, so unusual. Tomatoes in the grocery store were just blah. And in most restaurants. Mary-Aline, we didn't love small business during the BLM riots. Why didn't the destruction of small businesses in poor communities get more attention? The anti-police movement also hurts business, small and big. Yeah, but that's for a greater cause, for social justice. Yeah, of course, they don't love any business, particularly successful one. And as you note, they often, BLM often burnt the businesses in their own communities. The businesses were providing jobs and providing a livelihood for people. And those are the businesses, at the end of the day, they don't like any business. I mean, they live in some fantasy world where we're all kind of dependent on the government, but it's not clear where the government gets its money. I guess they just print it. Isn't that modern monetary theory? We just print the money and hand it out. So no, I mean it's pretty horrible. Yeah, I'm not following the discussion in the chat. All right, what else do we have? We have Ed. Kamala says price gouging is happening by talking about record profits, so she doesn't go by margins but total profits. What would be a good way to counter that? Well, I mean, why are profits bad is the first thing. Profits are good. Profits are a sign of the creation of value. And revenues are up. Revenues are up because the government provided people with a lot of free money during COVID. Saving rates went through the roof during COVID, and income was supplemented, and then we had all this other stuff. We had all the handouts, and that all entered the market, and people shopped more, which increased revenue, which increased profits. But what matters is, profit as a percent of revenue, not profit as a dollar amount, and profit as a percent of revenue. Maybe it went up during a certain period of time. Sometimes it goes down. Sometimes it's negative. But it's not very high for groceries. It never has been, even in 2022. So it's just silly. If I can start a business tomorrow that sells a huge amount, that produces massive revenue, but loses money, or let's say the profit margin is so small that nobody would ever invest in that business. The business would go under, not because it loses money, but because its cost of capital is higher than whatever it's producing. Nobody will not want to own it because you can't live off of it. So you can't start a business. Nobody's going to lend you money. Nobody's going to invest in you unless you can, show a profit, but a profit as a return on the capital invested. So it has to be a profit margin. Just dollars, there are better ways to deploy the capital. But yeah. So I don't know how, there's so much to unpack there. There's so many things that they get wrong. But again, the reason that the revenues were high is because people were handed free money. They went and spent it. Stephen, I have some nostalgia for the 1950s, illustrated by my mother giving me a beautiful 1940s silver dollar to buy a cake and a loaf of bread. I returned the change to her. Cool. Yeah, I mean, and yet life is so much better today. Even when it comes to economics, yes, you don't have silver dollars. Of course, in 1950s, the silver dollars meant nothing anyway because, Federal Reserve and you had fiat money. All right, let's see. Simon, on a previous show, you had mentioned that Biden was one of the most aggressive presidents when it comes to antitrust. Do you have sources of how you come to this conclusion? Thanks. I guess I don't have sources. I think it's the number of lawsuits that was filed by the FTC and the Justice Department against large businesses. That would be one way to measure it. That would be the main way to measure it. You could argue that at least some of those lawsuits were already filed by the Trump administration. But Lena Khan has basically come out, the head of the FTC, has said that she intends to be one of the most aggressive, right? So I don't have the stats, certainly don't have them in front of me. So, but I think you could search and you would probably find the numbers. And in terms of how many antitrust, federal antitrust enforcement, and your favorite car you have ever owned. Oh, I don't know what my favorite car brand is. We got troubled on the, video's back. I don't know what my favorite car brand is. I mean, I'd love to, I don't know, I mean, my favorite car is easy because my favorite car was my Audi S5, two-door S5. That was clearly my my favorite brand. My favorite car, my favorite brand, I don't know, I like the Maseratis. I like Ferraris and Lamborghinis. I don't know that I don't want to own any of them. Trying to think if there's anything that really stands out. Nothing really stands out at me right now. Once in a while I see a car I'd really like, but, oh, I know what it is. Actually, I do have a favorite car brand. I think the most beautiful car out there in the world is the Aston Martin. Aston Martin. I once told that to the CEO of Playboy magazine, who was an acquaintance at the time. And he owned one. And I commented it on, I thought it was the most beautiful car there was. And he said that was my feminine side talking. He said, the Ferrari is a masculine car and the Aston Martin is a feminine car. Anyway, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful car. And he owned both. He owned a Ferrari and an Aston Martin. If only. That would be fun. Michael says, can you try to interview Benny Morris? He actually seems pretty good. No, I will not. I have no respect for Benny Morris. You know, at least based on the historian that I really like, Ephraim Karsh, an Israeli historian, Benny Morris is very deceptive and is to a large extent responsible for, particularly in his younger days, is responsible for a lot of the bad history that surrounds the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Mistranslations, misquotations, things he should know better, but now he's dug deep, he's dependent on it. This is why in the debate with Finkelstein kept, but you said, and he's right, he did say stuff that is wrong. And he said stuff that plays into Finkelstein, the bad guy's hands. So no, I do not respect Benny Morris. He's a post-Zionist historian. He's a post-modernist intellectual, at least was when he was younger. And he's done nothing to basically go back and say, whoops, I'm sorry, I screwed up, I was wrong, here's the truth. Michael says, are you a fan of Curb Your Enthusiasm? I'm half a fan. Half the episodes are brilliant and half the episodes are embarrassing. So when he's good, he's excellent, and when he's bad, he's disastrous. I started watching the final season, and the first episode was so bad, I couldn't watch the rest. I haven't watched the rest. So it really is a 0-1 with me in Curb Your Enthusiasm. Some of them I really, really love. I think they're hysterical. Michael, what's the difference between ethics and metaethics? Metaethics is the metaphysical explanation of ethics. It's the foundation of ethics. It's what ethics rests on. So, for example, metaethics deals with kind of where does ethics come from? What is the source in reality? What is the source in reality that what about reality makes ethics necessary, and how do we know anything about ethics? So it looks at the foundations of it, the fundamental foundations of it. So bridging the is-ought gap is a meta-ethical point. The nature of man as a rational being is part of the meta-ethics. You can find all of that, by the way, in Opar, in Leonard Peikoff's Opar. Michael says, if you had to live in a cold climate, where would it be? New York City, Montana, or Switzerland? New York City. If I'm going to live in a cold climate, I want to live in civilization. And New York City would be a great place to live, particularly if I was younger and richer. New York City, you need money to live in well. Michael says, despite all the statism, why has the stock market performed so well? Well, because the best companies in the United States are really good, and they do amazing things, and this is why it's so evil, so damn evil, to go after big business. Big business is what keeps this economy going. Big businesses is what innovates and hires. Now, part of what they do is they buy small innovative companies and allow exits to small companies and provide incentives to people, small companies. But in many ways, anyway, so that is why. It's also the inflation. You know, big business can keep up with inflation because they can raise prices. So they don't. Then they're just successful. They're very, very good, and they play on an international scale. So they sell not just in the United States. They sell all over the world. Michael, what type of tax cuts will Trump do if he wins this time? I don't know. He's promising to place a ban on taxing tips, and Kamala has endorsed that as well. So the one thing Kamala Harris and Trump both agree on, they're both economically ignorant, stupid, moronic, is that they won't tax tips, which is just stupid. It creates all kinds of weird incentives. And why? What is unique about tips? Why tips? I want to be. What about what you give me on Patreon? I think that's a tip. I don't think you're paying for a product, right? I'm not shipping you anything. It's a tip. So and Super Chat is certainly a tip, right? All the Super Chats are tips, and the stickers in particular are tips. So maybe none of that should be taxed. It's just stupidity. It's just to try to buy votes. Will Trump cut taxes? I don't think he'll cut many taxes because the deficit will be so big, and he'll need some Democratic votes because I don't think Republicans will win both the House and the Senate if he wins. So I don't think he'll cut taxes. Maybe, but it'll be minor if he does. Frank, I wish you had mentioned Godzilla -1 film during your talk on sacrifice because they talked about how kamikaze planes had no ejection seats. Yeah, I mean, it's clear about that it's all about sacrifice, yes. I don't remember which talk about sacrifice you're talking about, but no, I didn't mention it. It's not what comes to mind. Michael, could ARI reach out to Alex O'Connor? He seems to be making the rounds lately. I bet he'd be willing to have a discussion with Onkar Ghate. That would definitely go viral. I don't know if it would go viral, but I'll suggest it to the Institute. I see no reason why not. Michael says, character may almost be called the most effective means of persuasion, Aristotle. Yes, I mean, we've moved far away from valuing character, particularly in our politicians, in our leaders. Apollo Zeus, good prices in the UK increased, food prices in the UK increased during the pandemic, but more recently I heard wholesale prices came down, but retail prices seem to not. Opinion. I don't know. I'd have to research what exactly you're talking about. But what does it mean coming down? Did prices literally go down? Or did inflation come down? Instead of going at 5%, they go up at 2%. And as far as I know, food prices in the UK have stabilized and are only rising at a low percentage, not at a very high percentage. So it depends what exactly they're saying, what exactly they're talking about, what exactly they're referring to. We'd have to dig deeper into that. I can look into it, but sometimes there's a lag. So producer prices might come down, but retail prices not, but they'll come down next quarter. So sometimes there's a lag, but competition ultimately will drive consumer prices down if producer prices have gone down as well. And the two are highly correlated, always have been. All right, let's go through these. Best thing the Dems have said about economics in the years is describing Trump's proposed tariffs as a national sales tax. Too bad they also like tariffs, but at least not as a cure-all national policy. Yes, Democrats are bad. I don't know if we'll cut taxes, but he will definitely increase taxes. That is, tariffs are tax. He has explicitly said he was going to increase it, and he can, as president, do it unilaterally without Congress. So we will definitely see tax increases under Trump. Andrew, is the prevailing immoral moral code degrading our economic knowledge such that the nation is more economically illiterate than generations ago? No, I don't think so. I think we'll always be economically illiterate. I think the difference is that in the past we valued freedom and we don't care anymore about freedom, and that's definitely the moral code. And I think that we used to have better intellectuals. We used to have intellectuals who weren't quite as dishonest as these are. We used to have better intellectuals that explain stuff to us. So it's not the fault of the people that they're economically ignorant. It's the fault of the intellectuals that encourage that ignorance, make that ignorance possible by advocating for stupid policies and feeding them. Soupy Cask, Harris has grown on me. Economically, she's horrible, but I appreciate her pro-American rhetoric and not focusing on identity politics this campaign. Yes, I agree, but the real question is, how will she govern? And will she give important positions and important places in her administration for people who do advocate for in peace? Phil Donahue has passed at 88. Yes. Sad. He was a great interviewer, particularly in his youth. And of course, he did some of the best interviews ever of Ayn Rand. So he was an important figure culturally because of the interviews he did. And those interviews on Ayn Rand are terrific, just terrific. You can watch them on YouTube. Good time to do it now that, in commemoration of Phil. Oyvind, you should consider inviting Brad Polumbo to your show and Kiyah Willis. I'll invite Brad. That's a good idea. I know Brad, and I'm pretty sure he'll come. Probably skip Kiyah just because of who she's affiliated with, although I really like her and I really like her posts, and she's done some really terrific stuff. I really admire what she's done, but I stay away from people associated with certain people. John, you said Murray is the determinist. Even objectivist psychologists like Locke think IQ is over 50% genetic, and behavioral has a genetic component. Behavioral has a genetic component. Behavioral has a genetic component. Yeah, everything has a genetic component, but that's different than being a determinist. I think Murray's a determinist. He's a, you can see that in what he writes about class and about race and about other things. He has a deterministic streak to him, I disagree with Ed Locke about over 50% of IQ is genetic. I also disagree with Ed Locke and others about the importance of IQ and how valuable IQ is and how important IQ is. This is the one thing I agree with Nassim Taleb on, is IQ. I agree with other things with Nassim in spite of him. As I've said, I'm not a big Murray fan. I've met Murray. I've seen him speak. I've talked to him. I've read one or two of his books. I'm not a big fan. I don't like the way he analyzes things. I don't like the way he approaches things. I don't like the way he thinks about things. And, so be it. All right, guys, I need to run. Thank you all. Don't forget to check out the sponsors below. I haven't had a chance to really pitch them, but I have to run. So check them out. John, the Ayn Rand Institute, Energy Talking Points by Alex, and ExpressVPN. If anybody wants to become a sponsor of the Yaron Brook Show, please write to me, yaron@yaronbrookshow.com, and I will see you all tomorrow later. Probably, when did I do this today? An hour later, 2 p.m. East Coast time. See you then. Bye, everybody.